Yeah. Yeah. Cathy and Ian. Oh, I can't hear you guys. Oh, you can hear me? Oh, I can't hear. Are you okay? So they are muted. So you guys are muted. It's weird that I'm looking up there. I should probably.
If you hover over the screen, it'll ask to unmute. Hover lower down.
Okay, we've got you now, I think.
Yay!
There we go. We just had to turn the Wi-Fi on and all this other stuff.
Are you guys in your truck?
We are, sorry, I just sent you an email. Our day has not gone to plan at all, but we're good. We've got Wi-Fi, we're in the truck. The little dog's going to pop up in a minute, so it will just be perfect.
Okay, cool. Awesome. But you're still good to go with this morning session? Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
great. I'm going to be looking over there and I'm going to be looking over here.
Okay.
You're in a room full of wonderful people right now.
Hello, wonderful people.
They're in
Our
Creston.
farm is in Creston, but we are currently in a parking lot in Kamloops because we've been picking up more solar panels this weekend.
Oh, wow. All right, so people are just trickling in.
Okay.
There's Glen and Cathy. So there's Ian and Cathy, and there's Glen and Cathy. All right, hi, Glen and Cathy. I'll ask you guys to unmute. Oh, I can't hear you, Glen.
You want us? Okay.
Yes, there you are.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Hi, Jacqueline. So we'll wait a couple more minutes. Ian and Cathy, where are you guys picking up your solar panels from? In Kamloops?
Yeah, Riverside Energy in Kamloops. We've dealt with them from the beginning. They've been really good.
Nice.
How many are you putting in?
Well, this is a top up.
So, a bank of 12 that's going on to a barn in the summer. That'll help us run our chiller unit too. We have a chiller unit and a 40-foot sea can that we kind of got up and running last year, but kind of only did enough to kind of get us up and running for the farming season in the summer last year. So we're kind of adding to that system and giving us a bit more generating capacity for the barn and stuff too. So.
We have 30 panels here, but it doesn't come close to producing enough for our operation.
Yeah, we kind of got a few different things set up. So we have our house on one system. So we have 6 panels for the house, which is working well. And then these other 12 panels that'll run the chiller in the barn. And then we have another 12 panels on a solar pumping system that we put in for our water last year. So we have a drilled well that we use for irrigation. And we put a solar pumping system in for that setup last year, which is working really well for us too. So we kind of pumped to we pumped to holding tanks right now. The plan is to put a irrigation pond in up at the top of the hill and then do a lot of gravity irrigation into the front field. But yeah, we're finding that's that's working really well. The solar water pumping is working really well for us, and no hydro bill, right?
We get a lot of sunshine as well in Creston, so
Yeah.
it's quite easy to power things.
Yeah, I think the technology's moved along like massively in the last probably, I don't know, six to 8 years. There's certainly way more options out there, and and the solar equipment stuff, like the prices are coming down all the time. It's getting a lot cheaper to actually install too. So we definitely feel it's certainly the way to go, just with the price of hydro and stuff, right?
And we've managed to do it so we're not grid tied on our farm at all. It's 100% solar, but we are still in early stages setting up at this location. We've farmed previously, but we just moved 2 years ago, so it's still fairly new. But yeah, we feel that we can generate enough for the farming business.
All right, so we're at 10:02. I'm just gonna let everyone or whoever registered for the event to trickle in whenever they can, but I think we should start. So I'm not keeping you guys online here for too long. I know Cathy and Ian, you guys are pretty busy right now. Well, Glen and Cathy as well. So I'll begin with thanking you both for joining us today. So a quick note about our conversation before we begin. This short event is part of the Restoring Soil Health course I'm currently teaching here at the Burnaby Community and Continuing Education. I am surrounded by my wonderful students. You can't see them, but they can see you. You guys are on the big screen. And this event will also be recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to this video sometime, hopefully next week. I highly encourage everyone joining us remotely to open up your chat window and say hello. Write down your name, the name of your farm, if you have one, and where you're located. I know Sky's already said hi. Thank you, Sky. Let's begin with introductions first. We have Glen and Cathy Beaton of Stonecroft Farms. Wave to the camera, Glen and Cathy.
Okay.
So Glen and Cathy each grew up on farms. Glen is from Alberta and Cathy's from Comox Valley. In 1977, they purchased a property in Black Creek, British Columbia, and then started down the path to organics. Their farm, called Stonecroft Farm, focuses on turkeys, and they also grow blueberries. Stonecroft has its own abattoir for their turkeys. They also grow grain on their fields to feed their turkeys. Any resources from managing and processing the turkeys become compost and return to the fields where they grow their grain. So they've established a circular system. And as Glen would say, the only thing that spins out of their circle is the turkeys. Big times of year for turkeys are, of course, Thanksgiving and Christmas, but Stonecroft has also been able to sell more turkeys straight to the customer and not just for holidays. They have their own farm store stocked with a variety of turkey and chicken products, as well as organic blueberries. I started working with Glen and Cathy in December of 2020. We are still in the process of monitoring their fields to grow the grain for their turkeys, making sure that their soil management practices are restoring the microbiome needed to grow their crops. So we started with understanding how they manage their compost piles, because they are dealing with a large volume of high nitrogen resources. We're talking about turkey parts. So that became our priority. So Glen and Cathy, thank you so much for joining us today. Our second guest farmers are Cathy and Ian Finley of Little Dog Farm. Cathy and Ian, can you guys say hi?
Hi.
Awesome. So Ian and Cathy started their farming career in 2013 when they moved their family to a 5-acre lot in Langley, BC. Their focus is on transparency and education, which caused the farm business to grow quickly. By 2016, they were supplying 11 local restaurants, providing 40 CSA boxes to regular customers, raising heritage pig breeds and grass-finished beef, attending 4 farmers markets and hosting events every weekend, culminating with co-hosting 1,200 guests at the annual Feast of Fields celebration. Their collective expertise and connections have assisted them in becoming strong advocates for sustainable and regenerative agriculture. Cathy is a regular contributor to Modern Agriculture magazine. In 2015, their farm was awarded a Chamber of Commerce Award for Sustainable Business of the Year. Cathy and Ian have been busy reestablishing their farming business since moving to Creston in 2020. Little Dog Farm currently delivers weekly veggie boxes to 20 families, potentially bigger this year, I would imagine,
Much.
Yeah.
and supplies the Savor food truck. The long-term plan is to move into agrivoltaics. Little Dog Farm is respectfully inhabiting, learning, and growing on Katunaha land. They work with nature to heal the land and produce healthy, nutrient-dense foods, using and promoting regenerative agricultural practices to ensure the legacy that they leave future generations is a bountiful, healthy environment while sharing knowledge and nurturing relationships with their farm peers. Thank you, Cathy and Ian, for joining us today. And finally, my name is Jo Tobias. I will be your moderator today. You can find out more about my services in my website, www.rootshootsoils.com. So both Stonecroft Farm and Little Dog Farm are in the process of restoring their soil. And one of the ways that we're monitoring the efficacy of the practices they employ on their farm is by monitoring the soil biology. As part of their remediation process, we are looking at the fields by analyzing the different biological communities, especially the nematode groups. Nematodes are indicators of soil structure. They're indicators of stability, energy, and nutrient transfer in the soil food web community. And we also discuss the best ways to prepare the soil so that it's more conducive to biology in the long run. Hopefully you'll have a lot of questions for them. I'll start off with a couple of handful to provide context around their methodologies. All right, so this is a question for both Cathy and Glen, and Cathy and Ian. What does regenerative agriculture mean to you, and why have you chosen to transition to this method of agriculture? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good. Sorry. I think for us, it's a continuation of learning. We actually started farming back in 2013 because we were so disenchanted with the food industry. Ian had some growing experience. I'd had experience on farms growing up. And so we decided to take things into our own hands. We just felt that there was a better way than what we were seeing within industrial agriculture and that kind of thing. So we started practicing kind of a permaculture approach to things. We really enjoyed some of the values, the core values that came from that. We found there were some challenges of translating that into a bigger farming practice sometimes. And then we started integrating more animals into our programs as well. So it just felt like when we started learning regenerative agriculture and what that meant, it felt like a natural progression for us. And then having built up that farm and made perfect soil there, we left it and came out to Creston to desert, really. Chemically and biology, the biology in the soil was just destroyed. The structure of the soil was non-existent. It was just blowing away on top, and then a compaction layer 2 inches down that was like concrete. So it just felt like we could find more of the answers from our experience at the previous farm and from what we were learning and continuing to learn about regenerative agriculture as well.
Thank you, Cathy and Ian. Glen and Cathy?
Well, we both were raised on chemical farms. So when we started farming, we started the way we were taught. But it seemed like it was really hard on the ground. We just weren't comfortable. So we actually went organic for a while. And then later, we transitioned into regenerative. We're just not happy with the chemical farming attitude towards the soil. And so we started to go regenerative. Yeah.
Wonderful. What do you, and this is a question, another question for both of you. Are you seeing a difference in, I know Glen and Cathy, you are organic growers, but is there a difference between organic agriculture and regenerative agriculture?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we dropped the, for a couple of reasons. We are not certified organic. We haven't changed anything, but we are not certified organic right now. We haven't changed, but 2 reasons. I didn't like being put in the box. With organic certification, you've got an inch thick binder you cannot do. And it kind of rubbed me wrong. A few things, just a couple, 3 things. And the second thing is very expensive. Unless you're pretty good size, it doesn't pay. If like we just sell direct to our customers, and we don't need the certification. Not knocking certification, they do a good job and they're excellent people, but it's expensive.
I think we'd agree. We've chosen not to certify at all for the same reasons. I think it's too restrictive in some ways, not restrictive enough in other ways. And the difference is, actually, I had a bit of a heated discussion with this with an organic farmer recently. You know, they do some great things, like, to reiterate what Glen said, the organic certification is great, but there's no restriction or little restriction on things like tillage, and you're still using a lot of inputs that aren't necessarily that you're generating yourself, or natural inputs. And so I think straight away, I mean, regenerative agriculture would tell you to move away from tillage. So there are principles like that that are a big difference for us, right?
Yeah, and I think as Glenn said, like just the cost of actually farming in that way, like that cost ends up with the consumer ultimately. And are people willing to pay, or should people be willing to pay extra to eat healthy food? And I would say no. All food should be healthy and nourishing. That is not typically the way that modern agriculture has gone. But I think as we start to understand the benefits of regenerative agriculture and what that can actually produce in the way of nutrient-dense food, I think people will start to maybe even move away from organically certified food and hopefully more into the regenerative area of food production. I certainly feel that if you're looking at purely soil health and trying to get the best product from a piece of land, then regenerative agriculture is certainly the way to go.
Thank you. Again, another question for you both. What are some challenges you've encountered so far during your transition to regenerative ag? So you can list 3 major challenges, whether it's a challenge with your field or a challenges within yourself. So the way that you've been growing before versus the way you're starting to grow now, or what are some challenges, practical challenges that you're noticing so far? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll get that one, I think. So I guess from a practical standpoint, equipment is very hard to find, like to actually farm in a regenerative way. If you want to go and buy a tillage tool or a power harrow or whatever else you want to do to destroy your soil, like there's numerous ways to do that. The whole agricultural industry has been set up around tools and tillage and prepping a field. So like if you want to head down that route, then there's a multitude of different pieces of machinery that'll get you to where you want to be. If you want to farm in a way that actually enhances the soil and makes it better, the choices are extremely limited, especially in Canada. We've certainly struggled to get equipment and have ended up down in the US, where I think they're a ways ahead of the Canadians with a methods of farming, I think. So I would say equipment for one is a big thing.
We actually have bought a seeder in from Denmark.
Yeah, we're looking for no-till seeding equipment. And we actually, brought it in from the Netherlands. Was the only place we could actually find a piece of equipment that would do what we want it to do. So I think that's a big challenge for sure. And obviously the cost of doing that is a lot more than, say, going and buying a piece of farming equipment locally. I also think just our mindset, like thinking about things in a different way, spending like time watching how the fields change over the seasons. watching what's going on with the soil and with the life around that, be it insects like pollinators, birds even. We're already starting to see changes on our farm, even though we've only been there 2 years, and the soil was in really bad shape when we got there. So I think it's taking time to kind of sometimes just step back. Like we're all really busy and trying to get stuff done, but I think to step back and actually take a look around you and take a look at what's going on with your property. That's a big thing for me, for sure.
And it's been interesting for us in this process of starting again. So I'd say we had some really great systems back at the last farm. That too had terrible topsoil. It'd all been quarried 40 years ago and never remediated when we got there. And we applied a system with pigs, actually. So we had like this 3-tier system where we'd have pigs in the field, veggies in the field, and a pasture cover crop. And we would rotate them around so the vegetables would always be following the pigs. What that did was break up the compaction. It really helped build nice topsoil. They were fertilizing as they were going. They were eating weeds by the roots. They were really essential part of our farm. And that happened quite naturally and organically, excuse the pun, for us. We've now come to this 60-acre desert and we're having to find other ways of doing it. And yeah, just taking the time, gathering the resources is hard. We see these people who are transforming farms within a year and they have the resources to throw at that, but we don't. So it's just being patient is one of the big challenges for us. I want to see it all green and leafy and flowery already, and it's not.
Yeah, I think it probably, certainly in Langley, I think it was probably year 7 when we saw a real change in just the way the land was producing and the quality of the produce that was coming off the land.
And our input lessened as well. It just felt like everything had fallen into place, all the balances had come together. And we backed off and just let things kind of happen. Eventually we were just picking really, rather than intervening in the farming.
Wonderful. Glen and Cathy, major challenges you've encountered so far during your transition?
Well, we've only been doing it 1 year. So I think the major challenge is the volume of crop we got. It's quite a shock to the ground not to put on anything, any chemical fertilizer or any organic fertilizer. And last year was a bad year anyway for farming. The heat. It's interesting. Another challenge is putting up with the peer pressure. There's a lot of peer pressure out there from other guys, and it's interesting.
And how are you dealing with the peer pressure?
Well, Cathy's from an old farm family here, so we can deal with it in less than polite terms.
I've got a great story about that actually, Glenn. There was a rumor about me in the local farming community that I was a witch because they had been seeing me like down on my knees in the soil and poking things into the soil. So obviously the conclusion that was drawn was that I was practicing witchcraft. That was the only thing it could have been.
Not quite that bad, but there's a lot of skepticism.
Mm.
A lot of skepticism from the chemical farmer. And that's where I'm anxious to get into year 2.
Yeah, I think my hope is that in the next 4 or 5 years, we get our soil back producing healthy food again. And then I think that the local community, there's interest there already. Like people are always driving by looking to see what's going on because we're a little different. We're not doing things the normal way. And I think as time goes on, I think the number of people that will get interested will increase, especially if we see the sort of production you're getting out of there. Like I'm already getting questions from a couple of neighbors who basically grow hay for a living. That's what they do. They grow hay and they export to wherever. And they're already asking questions as to what we're doing and why. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the next few years kind of pans out as far as the peer pressure goes.
Yeah, but definitely those attitudinal barriers are there for peers and I think consumers as well, you know, their willingness to understand. I think regenerative agriculture is a little bit of a buzzword at the moment. It sounds great, but people don't understand necessarily what it means and what it means for the farmer and the expense of farming that way sometimes. So yeah, just the educational piece, I think, for us as well, then for peers and for consumers.
There's lots of people interested in standing back and looking, lots of them, but lots of criticism too, you know, or skepticism, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for people to take, like some of the people around us are have been farming it's a multi-generational farm, so they've been farming the same way for 50, 60 or more years now, and now you tell them, well, actually there may be a better way to farm, and they got to take all the knowledge that they have and kind of put it in the garbage can and start again. And even for myself, I still struggle with certain aspects of the chemical side of how this whole system works, and kind of wrapping your head around that and putting even the knowledge that I have to one side and saying, you know what, okay, we got to think about this another way now. It's sometimes even hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, right?
Particularly when the chemical farmers are doing quite well around here, right? So why would they change? You know, it's been working.
Yeah, I think they get to a point though where it doesn't work anymore. Like I think that style of farming works up to the point where you've degraded your soil so much that it won't produce anymore. And then you got to look for other options, right? Which
is exactly what happened at our place previously. The guy had been farming hay crops and oats, and in a way that doesn't align with regenerative agriculture, and his crop and his yields and his income was just going down so much that he couldn't afford to do it anymore, which is why he sold the land. So we kind of knew what we were going to, but yeah, it's his way. He was just out. He just said, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not worth the effort, rather than doing that educational piece and learning about different systems. But the one we hear often from farmers in our area is you cannot grow hay without Roundup. And that's it. The conversation's over. So yeah, just getting people to open up attitudinally is definitely one for us, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a great emphasis on soil health with regenerative agriculture as well. And the amount of time with agriculture and how there's also this need to control what goes into the soil. And I think that's also one of the major challenges that a lot of growers experience or are running into, is to sort of what Ian mentioned earlier, is taking a step back and just really listening to how the land is responding to how you interact with it. Another question, what advice would you give to a farmer who is interested in transitioning to regenerative ag? This is for both Glen and Cathy, and Ian and Cathy. I mean, Ian and Cathy, yeah. Glen and Cathy. One of these, I'm just going to say Cathy and Cathy. So it's easier that way. Yeah. So what advice would you give to a farmer or even a backyard gardener? And I know that with gardening as well, you kind of take examples of what's out there with what farmers are doing, and you're applying that at a micro scale. So if you're, as a backyard gardener, you're starting to see that there's more studies now. There's more knowledge now about taking care of soil in a different way. What advice would you give that person?
Do it and be patient.
Yeah, patience is the biggest thing, I think. Like you're not going to see a massive change in year one. It's going to take a while to get to where you want to be, but yeah, patience and observation, I think, are the two biggest things.
We kind of know these things about our own bodies, don't we? We talk a lot about listening to what our body wants and looking after ourselves and self-care. And it's just those same terms for your farm, really. Listen to what's going on around you, observe and respond.
I think the biggest thing is to be patient. You know, you can't expect to see a massive change in year one. It's going to take a while to get to where you want to be, but yeah, patience and observation, I think, are the two biggest things.
We kind of know these things about our own bodies, don't we? We talk a lot about listening to what our body wants and looking after ourselves and self-care. And it's just those same terms for your farm, really. Listen to what's going on around you, observe and respond.
we took a little different approach. I think people should phase in over a number of years, and that's what you suggested, Joe. But I'm too old for that, right? We went cold turkey and go, because I'm going to be 73. I can't wait around, so we're just pushing ahead, and it reflected in our crop last year. But I'm hoping that we can pick up now. A lot of people can't afford. Well, I don't know that we can either, but just to go full bore. They want to phase in, and I think that's a smarter way if you're young enough to do it.
I would say too, don't be afraid to experiment, because everybody's soil is different. Just keep track of what you do and what works. Because we forget what we did last year.
Yeah, for sure, Glen. I'm Glen and Cathy. I'm really impressed at how you're tracking. And that's another thing. You're tracking the changes that are happening in each field, what you're putting in, what you're getting out of it. Seeing the Excel spreadsheet from Glen, it actually blew me away. I mean, it's like, wow, these guys are using Excel spreadsheets. And it was really fascinating to see the detail that you're putting in your trackers, right? You have each field categorized, and you know exactly what cover crops you're putting in, you know exactly what cash crops you want that year, what kind of equipment went on the field, and the weeds that are any kind of observations. And I think that was really, really cool to see you guys do. It was really helpful for me to provide you some guidance, right? Because that was historical information that I can use for my own research. So this is sorry, Glen and Cathy, did you want to add something to that?
No, that's good. That's you're fine.
I know you recently, this is again for Glen and Cathy, you recently decreased your turkey numbers. Can you tell us how many turkeys you were processing before you made that decision this year? And how much did you reduce it to this year?
Well, last year we produced over the year 2,000 turkeys, and this year we'll project maybe 800. Yeah, we sold. Yeah, we're just getting too old to run that plant that many birds.
And why did you decide to process your turkeys on your farm?
Well, we've done it since the get-go. We started turkeys in 1980, mainly because I wanted to do it the way I want to do it properly. We weren't satisfied with the other abattoir, so we've got a licensed abattoir here, and small. Yeah, and it's better. The birds just walk over to the plant, right? There's no trucking, there's no anything. Our birds don't even have never left the farm. A lot of them have never left the farm. We raise heritage birds. Cathy hatches them here, and they never have ever left the farm except in a bag.
And Cathy and Ian, when you had your farm in Langley, did you guys also have your own abattoir, or you? Yeah.
No, we did not. Not for the want of trying, really. There's a lot of restrictions provincially and municipality to stop you setting up abattoirs now. So we would have loved to have done that, but no, we were transporting to Chilliwack. But definitely it's the better way in terms of stress to the animal and the quality of meat after that. If you can process on site, it's a much better way of doing it.
I think Austin has a question here on the chat window. I'm just going to ask it now because we were talking about chemical farming earlier. Is there a way of predicting when chemical farming will kill the soil to a point that it isn't financially viable to use that methodology anymore?
I think it's hard to predict that because of the differences in farming. For our piece of land, I think things went bad quite quickly for that guy, just because he was tilling as well in excess. He actually wasn't using chemicals on his farm. He was not using any inputs at all. So there was nothing going into the land, and he was tilling that hayfield several times a season. So things went bad for him quite quickly. But I think because of the vast differences in how people farm, it is hard to predict. What would you say?
Yeah, I think it very much depends on your crop and what sort of chemical inputs you're putting in there. Like there's so many chemicals out there that can be used for various reasons, whether it be nitrogen fertilizer or pesticides or herbicides or a mix of both. Like there's just so many out there that they say can treat every problem that you could possibly encounter as a farmer. I think it treats the problem pretty quick, but then you're kind of bought into that system, right? And you're forced then to buy more chemical the next year. And I think if you look at just the historical data that's out there and how much chemical that these farms are buying now in relation to how much chemical they were buying when these products were first introduced in the market, you'll see the volume has exploded exponentially. As far as the damage to the soil goes, I don't think that, to my knowledge anyway, I don't think there's any study out there that looks at combinations of chemicals and the possible damage that they do to the soil. They take each product as its own entity, and they do testing, and they figure out what it can and cannot do. And then out to the marketplace it goes. But a lot of farmers are spraying multiple chemicals multiple times a year. And I don't really think anybody knows. I don't even think the chemical manufacturers know what sort of damage that's doing and whether it's even repairable in some cases, I think.
We actually have a real life example of that, because we were hired to be consultants for a lady who bought a 5-acre piece of farmland in Richmond, and it was ex-cranberry bog. So it'd grown cranberry. Was it cranberry?
Yeah, they
grown cranberries, and they'd stripped it and basically moved next door and started again and sold this piece of land once it was dead. So it had been stripped 3 years when we worked onto it, and it was bare. There was no pioneer weed species. There was nothing living on that land. And we spent some time looking for examples of people that had remediated land in that situation after cranberry crops, and we couldn't find anything. People basically farmed them until it was dead, and then they walked away. That was the prime example.
Yeah, okay. So I remember talking to a gentleman who deals with industrial reclamation of land. So he goes to places, chemical factories like gas plants, petrochemical pieces of land to remediate that land after the business is left. I sent him the chemical analysis of that piece of land, and he was right on the phone because he wanted to know where it was. And he said he wouldn't even know where to start to remediate that piece of land. It was so contaminated. Like he said, I wouldn't even know where to start to remediate that piece of land.
We looked at the permitted chemicals for cranberry farmers from BC, and every single one, there was 53 permitted chemicals, and every single one had a column that said harmful to birds, harmful to bees, harmful to butterflies. Every single one.
Fish,
it was just
aquatic life.
Yeah. And especially in a place like Richmond where the water table keeps coming up, so that chemical is never going away. It just keeps coming back up. Yeah, it was destroyed. We walked away.
We walked away. We didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Glen and Cathy, is there anything you want to add regarding Austin's question with chemical farming and whether or not there's a way to predict at which point will it kill the soil and it's not financially viable to use that methodology anymore?
Well, isn't hydroponics viable? Yeah, I don't. I agree with what I'm about to say, but the truth of the matter is, the farm that I lived on, we sold it years ago. The one field has been farmed for 50 years, the same crops, either wheat or barley. And last year, last year wasn't a good year, but the year before it was excellent. And they just keep hammering more and more and more chemicals. How it's gonna end up, I have no idea, but right today, it's doing fine. But they're hammering the chemicals to it. There's no question of it.
Right. And it's almost like we're not going to see those numbers, right? How much money are those farmers spending on their fertilizers? And
No idea.
we're never going to know. We're never going to know.
But
I think it'll get to a point though where it just becomes economically unviable to farm that way. Like if you look at the artificial price of nitrogen fertilizer this year, for example, like it's gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Like farmers are saying, well, don't really know whether I can afford to put this material on my land anymore. And I think that we have to be looking at inputs and the cost of those inputs and whether we can farm without them.
now that's a different subject, which I totally agree with you, right? It must be costing them a fortune. But if the truth were known that protein, I think there's more to wheat than protein, but their protein is way better than ours, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, you know, just hammer more nitrogen and you'll get the protein. I don't know. Not that we are going to do that, but there is an argument out there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Okay. Sky had a question quickly here. What is the no-till seeder you got from the Netherlands, Cathy and Ian?
It's a company called Vredo. And the reason we chose those guys was they have a kind of a unique piece of equipment. So if you look at no-till seeders, typically the spacing is from 6 inches and up between actual seeding wheels. These guys have got it down to like, I think it's just over 2 inches between actual seeding wheels themselves. So we get a lot more product within the same area. Basically, it's a lot denser planting wise. We're using the seeder for cover crop planting and for grass and orchard seeding in between the trees in the orchard is what we bought the equipment for. My hope is that the farmer who lives next door to us and grows alfalfa all year, he's struggling to get his crop to produce. He had a really bad year last year. So we've been talking to him about possibly sharing some of the cost of the equipment as far as like we just rent the equipment to him. As far as I'm aware, there's no other piece of equipment like that, certainly in the valley that we farm in. And the backup from these guys in the Netherlands has been outstanding to this point. Like we send them some drone footage of the property. We send them some pictures of the I don't know whether you can even call it soil. We send them some pictures of the dirt that we have on our property right now, and talked in length with them about the sort of challenges that they've been facing. They have similar challenges in the Netherlands, like lots of tillage and abuse of soil for many generations now. So they're kind of in the same place that we are as far as trying to get the soil back to a point where it's actually producing good quality food. So they've been a good asset to us for sure.
And we can send Jo the link to that company and the details of that seeder so she can share it amongst you all.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that company's actually at the BC Ag show in March in Abbotsford, I believe. They're actually coming over with some equipment and stuff too.
And Cathy and Ian, tell us, we're going to get into the cover cropping conversation now. Tell us about your experience with cover cropping your fields on dead soil.
It doesn't really work, Joel. So I think we certainly have a combination of things going on. So the soil was like, it was so dead that it wouldn't really, we struggled to even get anything to germinate. So we're kind of caught between applying compost tea to soil which has no plant life and trying to get plants to grow. A particularly dry year last year. Certainly for us, it was very hot for a very long period of time. And to be honest, I think that was our biggest downfall last year was irrigation. So we're kind of reassessed our game plan, I guess you want to call it, this year. We're adding some irrigation onto the back 10 acres, which is where the orchard's getting planted in the spring next year. So we'll get the irrigation up and running, and then actually go and seed this year as well, and continue with the compost tea program that we got going last year in the fall. And I think that we should be good this year. I think we now have a latent seed bank, so we sowed cover crops for 2 years now. We did get a bit of germination, but the bulk of it did not. So we still have seed in the ground. So our hope is that seed bank will be beneficial for us this year. And obviously we hope that we don't have a year like we did last year with the amount of rainfall we had.
We took some quite extreme action last year that felt it went against all of our values as well. Because with the cover crop, things like we planted a tillage radish to help break up the compaction. And actually just what happened is the tillage radish got pushed up. It didn't help break up the compaction at all because it's so bad. So we had to go with what felt wrong, and we ripped the soil right down. We had to break it further in order to build it back up. And as much as it hurt our hearts, we've already seen a difference in that soil and those few cover crops that did germinate in terms of runoff. So the first winter that we were at this property, we watched our soil run down the road and into the lake at the bottom for probably 8 weeks of the winter at least. And this year we haven't had any runoff at all because the water has been able to get into the soil and stay there, and the roots that are there have held things in place as well. So even though it felt unsuccessful and it felt counterintuitive, we're already starting to see some positive results from those actions.
Wonderful. And Glen and Cathy, this is kind of a nice segue to what Cathy was mentioning with water. With the cover cropping, I know last year around October, or the management practices that you have been doing on the farm, you'd emailed me with the subject, no ponding. You were referring to one of your fields where the soil behaved differently with water. You mentioned that you've had good rain over the past few days and there is no ponding. Can you tell us more about the history of that field, its relationship with water before, what you noticed in the fall of last year after heavy rains, and what you think caused that no ponding effect?
Okay, well, you have to understand our farm is undulating, right? So we have dips and hollows, and we have put in drains connecting the hollows right to the out. But traditionally, we got 2 fields, but it would stay after a heavy rain. It would stay for 5 or 6 days and then drain out. You know, it slowly drain out after it stopped raining. This year there was no ponding at all. It was no ponding at all. We used to have ducks out there for a while, and this year there was 6 ducks. There was no water. And I think that was because of the spraying with the biology. That's the only reason and the cover crop, of course. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Right. So you see that as a good thing, the water. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we got a couple fields like that, but our place is undulating, right? So it's probably different than other places.
And how do you think that there's a relationship with the subsoiling practices that you were doing in the dry summer and on top of spraying with compost teas? Do you think that there's a relationship between the no ponding and the mechanical disturbance that was employed, plus the biological inoculation, plus the cover crop?
Yes, we did subsoil. But we always have we always use the cultivator.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think it's mostly the biology myself. But I don't know. Between the two, it's totally different. The field is much drier and better.
That's great. All right, so I'm gonna get into questions from, those are my list of questions. And I believe I have quite a few here on the chat window. I have some here as well from my students. What services or products aren't you seeing in the market that would be really good for regen egg farmers, besides the equipment discussion that you mentioned earlier, Ian? What are some other things that you think would benefit farmers as they transition to regen?
I think some of the services that you offer for sure. There's a lot of microscopy involved in this whole process. If you want to get it right, and you want to be making good compost and good compost tea, and then basically spraying that biology back onto the soil, there's some balances and checks that need to be made for sure. So you're not undoing all your good work by spraying something that you shouldn't be. Because it happens, right? We get bad batches of compost and stuff, and we want to be catching that before that ends up out on a field causing more harm than good. Those services, I think, typically haven't been around, Joe. And I think now we're beginning to understand the actual biology of it. I think those services will become more entrenched in our farming operation for sure. The typical soil analysis is chemical, right? And I think a lot of people are still stuck on the NPK thing, and that's all they look at. As long as that's good to go and the pH is about right, then we should be good, right? And I think as we begin to understand how complex the soil food web is, and how we can alter the compost that we apply to different species or different cultivars of vegetables or trees. I think as we understand that more and more, I think that service that the likes of yourself provide will become even more beneficial, I think, to certainly the farmers like us. Like I feel personally, I don't really want to sit behind a microscope for hours every day. I don't really have time to do that either. And I think as the services you provide are, it's awesome for us just to be able to send a sample away, get an analysis back, and then be able to tailor what we're doing on the farm without having to spend hours behind a microscope that we can ill afford. Really, we need to be out in the field, right?
Yeah, and I think this is not really services, but I would like to see more support from above, some more governmental support. BC ran a big summit last year on regenerative agriculture, but I'd like to see something with teeth come out of that, something that really supported farmers in their transition, acknowledging that there might be a loss of crops for a couple of years while the soil got used to what was happening, and encouraging new farmers to move into that. Maybe that is done through lending and borrowing. You have to have a solid, sustainable plan for your farm in terms of access funds, or maybe it's done through granting opportunities. But yeah, raising the expectation for farmers and supporting them in that process, I think, would be an area to fit. Is it definitely a gap at the moment?
Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of the agricultural policy, certainly in BC, it's very much still commodity driven. Monocropping, all the things that we know really don't work in the long term. I feel that the BC Ministry of Ag is still pushing. I'd like to see them try and get away from that somehow and back to a more traditional farm that has multiple prongs, maybe, or multiple diversified products coming out of one particular farm, maybe.
It's happening elsewhere. It's happening in other countries. There's no reason why it shouldn't be happening here.
Yeah, and just going back to the cover crop thing, that's one of the big things is regeneratively is to no bare soil ever, right? Like once your season's done, you pull your cash crop out, whatever that may be, then you want to see the soil covered like 100% of the time with whatever cover crop mix you decide it works best for you. I think down in the US, I think they have, certainly in some states, they have very good programs for cover crops. Like the government is actually physically paying farmers to sow cover crops. And we don't have that type of backup here right now. Like certainly in the valley we live in, like there's multiple hundreds of acres of bare soil every winter once they pull the grain crops off. And really, there's no reason for that. Like if the finance was there and there was a bit of backup from the government just to get the actual program going, I think then the farmers would start to see the benefit. If you could actually kind of give them a little leg up, I think you'd see a lot more transitioning that way, because ultimately they'll save money in the long run, right?
Glenn, you have something to add?
Well, I can see a little bit of movement in the government, not near enough. But when we were audited with the Minister of Environment, and they were interested in our compost. I thought they were a little more receptive than historically. I think there's a little bit of movement in the government, not near enough, like Ian's saying, but at least it's not totally hard against it.
I think it's individuals that are interested. Lana Popham is interested. I think it's the collective movement that is slowing things down for sure.
Yeah, well, I think there is a little bit of movement, but it'll take people like Joe to pursue it and get it into action. Like they're really wanting everything covered. Well, we're in the rain belt, of course, so they're wanting all the compost to be covered and on concrete. Well, I don't think that can make very good compost.
Yeah, we had a similar experience in Langley. Actually, we were making our own compost there, and yeah, they kind of made us put a concrete pad under our compost making area, and it was like, well, it's kind of defeating the object of what we're trying to do here. But then they throw the book at you, right? Hey, the legislation says it's got to be this way, right? And
Yep.
in our area, actually, the local municipality has just started a green waste collection system and setting up a composting facility in Creston. But they're going down the old composting route where it goes in a big pile, and it's like that's a resource that we need for sure in the valley. Like we don't really have good compost there at all. Like there is one compost making facility in the valley, and the compost is poor, to say the least. Like we need to be taking this resource and actually being able to transform it into something that the farmer can actually put back on his field. But the municipalities seem to be just going down this waste reduction route, is what they like to call it, right? We head down the same route every time, and I don't know how as a movement we get them on board with maybe there's a better way of doing this, and maybe it won't cost you as much to deal with it, and then maybe you can actually sell this stuff to the farmer at the end of it, who will pay money to buy it from you, because it's actually a product that's going to be good for his farm.
Couldn't agree more with you, Ian. I couldn't agree. Yeah, but I think it will come. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, and I guess we're all swimming uphill, right? We're swimming against the stream, and
Yep.
and it's difficult to do that.
Yep.
I'm just gonna go back to the cover cropping, and I want to talk more about composting as well. But Jacqueline here has a question on the chat. Do you use silage tarps to work in the cover crop, Or I guess I would extend that to, how do you manage your cover crop to prepare your cash crop in the ground for the season?
Yeah, we have to cover. It's really the only way. If you're not tilling, which we're trying not to do, so we actually invested in a what they call a tilther, which is a very small piece of equipment that used by hand that we run down the beds just to prep the beds now, and it basically fluffs up maybe the top inch, 3/4 of an inch to an inch of the soil to prepare a seed bed for us. I don't think there is any other way of prepping a seed bed other than a small amount of tillage that you really you really can't get away from it. Cover crops are great in the winter. The biggest thing is being able to kill them, so you can actually get your cash crop planted in a timely fashion in the spring. We have some cover crops which the winter will kill here, but some which we have to top up to actually kill that cover crop. Otherwise, you end up with problems during the season, right? It keeps coming back.
So then, is there a way that you're managing your cover crop in the orchard, in your orchard system versus your vegetable system? So I would imagine that how you manage, depending on the crops, the cash crops that you have, your management of cover crops will be slightly different.
Yeah, like in the orchard, it's purely as ground cover, right? So we went away from what was traditionally a drip irrigation system for orchards. That's typically how orchards are watered. With drip irrigation, we have micro sprinklers now, which we'll be putting into our orchard rows, which you're starting to see more and more in orchards now, for two reasons: better water dispersal, better development of roots in a wider area, not just like right at the bottom of the plant where the water is. But it also allows us to have cover crop between our orchard rows, and the plan is to put probably chickens and maybe even ducks in between our orchard rows to kind of keep control of the actual growth. So we're not planning on running a mower down there at any point. And if we do, it'll be a chop and drop process. So that material will never come out of there. We'll just chop it and leave it to go back into the soil. But the benefits of having animals within an orchard system, I think we certainly saw a big benefit down in Langley when we were farming there with chickens and amongst our fruit trees. It just helps, right? Like that pooping and stuff, that all drops back into the soil. It's all feeding the biology, right? Like if you can leave that material on the surface and it's feeding your plants, then like I'm not planning on ever fertilizing my orchard ever. Like we have
We've designed the orchard that way as well. It's a bit of an extension of a nap orchard. This guy in Quebec at Miracle Farms.
Yeah, Miracle Farms in Quebec.
Yeah. Talks about different mixed orchards and integration and stuff. And the nap orchard is basically you plant a nitrogen giving plant and then an apple and a pear. And we've extended that a little bit. So we've got nitrogen plants every third tree, but also lots of different varieties that complement each other, not just apples and pears, but also different, what I'm trying to say is different species, but different varieties of those species as well.
Yeah, I think that like diversification, like as many different types of trees and as many different cultivars as you possibly can within your orchard. Less issues with pests, less issues with disease.
I just saw a question pop up about what we're using for nitrogen fixing trees, and there's a couple of different ones, but I'm happy to send you again the spreadsheet with all our tree varieties and the nitrogen fixing trees on as well, because it took us like months to plan it out. So we might as well share it now we've done it.
I saw that list. It looks really good. You guys did your homework.
Yeah, a lot of the nitrogen fixing trees are actually useful too. Like there's a Russian olive, which you can pull product off too. Honey locust, which is great for wood. It's very hard, a very hard wood. So yeah, we've got, and it's all about. I guess we get so fixed on production and revenue, and sometimes we forget that actually we got to give something back in order to get a little more out of the program, maybe. So even though every third tree is not producing fruit for us, it's putting nitrogen in the ground. So now I'm not buying fertilizer from some faceless guy down the road, right? So then is it adding to the revenue of the farm? Well, yes, it is, because it's reducing your input costs, right? So, and I think, but that again is it's a different way of thinking. Like we could have just planted 10 acres of the same cider apple, and we would have had all sorts of problems with disease and pests and God knows what else, right?
if you're interested in orchard planning, Miracle Farms on YouTube is a really good place to look and listen to what that guy has to say. He's really informative, he's really knowledgeable, and he shares that knowledge happily.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian and Cathy. That was a lot of information there with, no, that's great. It's wonderful. Glen and Cathy, how do you manage your cover crops?
Well, in the spring, we have a roller crimper, and we'll try roller crimping. But with cereal crops, I'm of the opinion in our area, we have so much grass that there'll be limited tilling. We'll have to plow. We'll have to plow some to control the grass. I can't see any other way.
Right.
You either have to spray it, okay, or plow it when the grass comes in too heavy. I just can't see any other alternative. But we'll get her back into production as soon as we can, covered as soon as we can. But we're gonna roller crimp for a number of years first.
And how are you then incorporating your, maybe we're getting into the details here with compost, biological inoculants, but how are you incorporating your inoculants with roller crimping and planting in your cash crop? Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're scheduling these things and how are you managing all these different practices?
Well, not as well as what I'd like to see. We're just trying different things, different cover crops in the spring. Inoculation, we just buy an inoculant right now and put it on the different varieties of peas. We personally like peas and oats. The turkeys and the sheep and the cows all like that. So, and it's a good combination. So we're using a lot of mixed peas and oats. They mature at roughly the same time, and that's a good combination for our cash crop. And then we plant clover and whatever as well.
And I know that we talked about planting clover as well, and as a cover crop. And there are studies where clover causes bloat in cows, but you're seeing the opposite. Can you tell us more about that?
What can I say? I was always taught that it does have bloat, but we touch wood. We have never had any ourselves. We have sheep and cattle, and we've never had a problem. But boy, you read anything and there's problems all over. I don't know why.
And what do you think? What do you think is causing that? I think you mentioned that biology may have some kind of an influence in not causing bloat, sorry, in your cattle.
Well, that's speculation on my part,
Yeah.
right? Like I haven't got any science behind that. It's just speculation. I hesitate to even say that, you know. Yeah, you know, I haven't got any science behind it.
Yeah.
It just haven't had a problem.
And I want to go back to composting here because that's one of composting is and making compost teas and extracts. Those are some of the major practices that both of your farms, you guys are incorporating it as part of your regen practices. Glen and Cathy, how have your composting methods changed since before we met and now, and how you're managing your compost now?
Well, quite a bit different. Like you mentioned, our compost really heats up fast. It doesn't matter how much carbon you put in there. It's so much nitrogen, it heats up really fast. And historically, I would turn it just, once every 2 weeks or once a week, and it would be 170 2 days later, right? It gets hot right now. We have to now we spread it out more. Go through the heat cycle and then spread it out, get it more area. But that's where we run into the BC government not wanting it covered because we have so much of it. We don't have a building that you can cover it in. And that's a problem. Yeah, but yeah, we don't let it get nearly as hot as what we try not to. It still will go up there in a day, 2 days at the most, it'll be up to 170. And that's with a lot of chips in it. It's just so hot.
Yeah, I think the cool part about what's the changes that have been happening on Glen and Cathy's farm is that they've developed connections with local arborists. Is that correct?
That's right. They bring in chips. We have a huge big pile out there, and yeah, we're running really high chips to awful rate.
And yeah, and now they're starting to include fungal spawn into their chips. Some turkey tails, some lion's mane. So they're starting to go on that path of diversifying the biology in their compost so that they can put it out in their fields. Ian and Cathy, can you tell us about how you're spraying your biology and the equipment that you're using, and the challenges? I know you mentioned equipment challenges for regen farmers, but what did you have to do for your farm to get the proper sprayer in your context?
Yeah, long drawn out process. It probably took us 12 months to actually figure out a product that would work for us. So we ended up with a sprayer out of New York State in the US. Lots of conversations with the actual sprayer manufacturer. So different type of actual spray pump. So diaphragm type of spray pump as against a roller pump, which was a big challenge for us, actually finding a manufacturer that could do that for us for the size of equipment that we wanted to use. We're not on a conventional sprayer. We have undulating land on our property too, so sprayer with arms is not really an option for us. So we went to a type of spray nozzle that gives us 20 foot of spread either side of the sprayer at the back, but not actually on spray arms. So it allows us to maneuver a little easier in the field when it's undulating. Another big challenge, I think, is getting a piece of equipment that is not full of 90-degree bends that your biology is slamming up against the corner of. I know you talk about the soil food web and Dr. Elaine Ingham, and that's one of her big things, right? Getting equipment that is actually what we need. And we still struggle, like we still have 90-degree elbows on some of our spray equipment, which is not ideal. But trying to get a manufacturer to actually make a piece of spray equipment specifically for your needs for regenerative agriculture and spreading compost tea is really difficult. They're certainly open to changing their practices, I think. Like a couple of the big spray companies that we talked to were very interested in certainly in what we were doing, and I reiterated that there's a market for this equipment if you kind of get ahead of the curveball here and start producing equipment that actually performs the way we want it to. There's certainly a market opening up for that. As far as I'm aware, there's nowhere in Canada that produces a piece of equipment that you can just pick up off the shelf and use. I know people are modifying all sorts of equipment to make them work for them. But it would be nice to see somebody kind of adopt some spray equipment that everybody could use, that's for sure.
Revolution is exhausting.
So I guess what I heard there is Ian's going to start manufacturing this equipment. Is that
Yeah,
right?
the thought had crossed my mind. Yes, it's it's not a difficult piece of equipment to put together, but there seems to be, I guess the spray industry has gone down a particular route. They have a particular type of spray, a particular type of pump, and it's all geared around synthetics and spraying chemicals. Now you want to put living beings through your sprayer. Well, that technology doesn't work anymore. But there is companies out there that do have the technology that can make it work. They kind of need a bit of an economic shove to get them going.
Awesome. Glen and Cathy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No.
Awesome. Sky had a question here. Jacqueline, actually, where do you buy your cover crop?
There's a few different places. We use Premier Pacific Seeds, which are based down in Port Kells, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, in Port Kells. So those guys are pretty good. They'll actually make a specific cover crop for you if you know exactly what you want to put in there. They'll blend it for you. They have the ability to do that. So they've been a good resource for us too.
And best value that we found as well, looking around. So
Yeah,
we'd recommend those.
Yeah, their pricing's pretty good too. Yeah.
Glen and Cathy?
Oh, I think we just go to the local feed store, and they come up with what I think is a good price, and they'll get what we want. Yeah.
Awesome. How do you manage crop residue?
We don't, because we don't have any yet. Although, having said that, we left everything in the vegetable garden from last year, so we didn't really pull anything out of there at the end of the season. We'd normally kind of clean up and then plant cover crop. We didn't do that last year for a couple of reasons. One, we kind of ran out of time. The weather got on top of us pretty quick. And secondly, I certainly felt that we should probably leave as much of that material as is humanly possible to kind of decompose over the winter months. So we left everything, the sunflowers that we'd planted, we left all the stalks, everything just standing up. Most of it's, well, pretty much all of it's on the ground now. And when the snow goes, we'll see what's left, I guess.
I think that's one of the other challenges, isn't it, about regenerative farming, because that action that we wanted to leave root systems in place in the ground that would promote the longevity of whatever biology was in there. The place looks a mess. It's dead plants everywhere, and you know, when you go into a field and you till it at the end of the season and you make it look lovely, it just looks so tidy. It's so much more aesthetically pleasing. I actually think that's a really big barrier for people to see this sort of like left garden versus a nice tilled field is quite a big difference for sure.
For sure. Glen and Cathy, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, we roller crimp and pull the drill behind us in the one pass, and the roller crimper kind of crushes it into the ground, and there's no till behind us, and just planted the cover crop. It seems to work pretty good.
All right. Sky, are you talking for inoculant rhizobium or a biostimulant? As far as spraying goes, Glen and Cathy, this is a question for both. Can you describe what you are actually spraying? How are you making your sprays or your inoculants? Yeah, so anything you want to share about that? Maybe I'll start with Glen and Cathy.
Well, we kind of do the formula you suggested, Joe.
I want you guys to explain it.
Okay. Well, we have a brewer that is what 500 US gallons, I think they claim it is. And we put in a bit of fish, hydrated fish, right? And a bit of kelp, and a little. We do put in a little bit of raw milk. I still milk my cow, and we put in a little bit of raw milk, and we spray it. Last year we sprayed it at 450 real is really what it is, 400, and we spray it on 4 acres, and we did it 3 times, in the spring and 3 times in the fall.
And just to elaborate on Glen's point there, he's making both farms, they're both making compost teas or compost extracts. And the biology comes from the compost that they make on their farm.
Oh,
And so I think Glen and Cathy they're using an ingredient that I've never used before, which I think makes a difference, which is raw milk. Raw milk has lots of beneficial microorganisms in them, as well as enzymes that could potentially help with building up soil. And they also have diverse biology in their compost pile. Cathy and Ian, could you talk more about your process and what are you using as far as ingredients go in your compost and the diversity of biology in your piles?
Yeah, we're trying to use as much material off the farm as we can. So we actually just bought a chipper for the tractor so we can chip all the fallen branches and stuff and make our own wood chips. We have been buying them from a local mill the last year to make compost. We pick up grain from a brewery. There's a small microbrewery in town now. So we pick up spent grain from the brewing process, which is our high nitrogen portion of our compost. We have a chicken producing operation not far from us. So we pick up some waste from those guys. That helps us with our high nitrogen too. And then most of the green material, well, pretty much actually all of the green material comes from the farming operation, whether it be de-leafing produce before it heads out, the CSA boxes or whatever that may be. But yeah, we pull all our green stuff off the property. We did do some compost with Joe just before the fall there with spent grapes, right, from the local winery. So yeah, so grape skins and some brown material from there, and that seems to have produced some decent compost also. We'll send that out to you, Joe, in the next couple of months, just so you can have a good look at it. But yeah, and then we're taking that material and doing extract and brewing too. So we have typically an 8-hour brewing cycle for that material, and that goes into the sprayer and then off into the field. So we sprayed last fall 3 times in the orchard, so 3 passes, and then we'll do the same in the spring this year. It's still too cold for us to start spraying yet. We still have snow cover, so we got a little bit of time left yet before we start spraying again in the spring.
And this is more of a question for me. Do you feel that this type of practice for spraying biology, using the compost that you make on site, or buying compost from other farmers that could potentially be making really good compost, do you think that methodology can completely replace synthetics? This is a question for both.
I would like to think so. Me personally, I've never used synthetics. I don't believe that's the way forward. Like anything we're introducing into the environment that's not there naturally, my personal belief is it's probably doing more harm than good in the long term.
It's a good question that we don't have the answer to. I don't think there's the data out there yet, because again, it's that mindset. People aren't in that mindset of looking at what we're doing in any closed levels. I think anecdotal, we would say that we have seen benefits on using this compost tea over spreading compost in the traditional way, like we have done before. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that a chemical will do that you can't do naturally. Like there's always I think nature has a solution. Whether we know what the solution is at any given moment, I think sometimes we don't.
We've got to catch up.
I think we're naive if we think that we understand it all, because we don't. We're constantly learning, but I haven't come across any problem that we couldn't fix naturally up to this point. It may take a little bit longer. It's not that quick fix, spray it and the problem goes away. It might take a season or 2 maybe to fix the problem, but I think ultimately it's fixable with natural tools as opposed to synthetic ones.
Glenn and Cathy?
Well, I get into this argument all the time. I think it will replace chemicals, but that's certainly under heavy debate. Well, somebody will see. Yeah.
I think this is from Sky. What research has there been about the survival rate of surface applied biology? That's still to be determined, Sky. Surface applied biology. I would imagine that you meant either leaf foliar treatment versus a soil treatment. Compost teas, we usually use them for foliar treatment to cover the above ground parts of the plant so that we are discouraging pathogens to get onto the surfaces of the above ground parts and prevent those pathogens to proliferate. Soil surface applications, it's really more about encouraging root growth, encouraging the microbiome around the roots of the plant. Survival rate of surface applied, it's really hard to say because that's also climate dependent. So if you're going to be spraying in the spring, also your practices will determine the survival rate as well, how you're interacting with your soil. So if you're spraying biology in the soil, there are so many things that you could be doing from the time that you spray to the time that you're harvesting that could affect the survival rate of that biology. Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. But really, the idea is to just watch your plants, right? Watch how your plants are growing. Watch how your interactions are affecting the growth in general. Let's see here. I don't know if I have. Is there anything else that you would like to have or that you would like to add, Cathy and Ian? Any questions you want to ask each other? Maybe I can, if there are questions that Glenn and Cathy have for Ian and Cathy, or vice versa, anything at all?
Glen and Cathy, what made you change? What was the deciding factor that made you want to go down this different route?
We just didn't like the chemicals. All this chemicals, how can you put on poison on your and come out with good food? It just didn't make sense to us. And going over the ground, it's just too much. It's just too much. I think there's a better way. Well, I am confident there's a better way, and we're trying to pursue it now. And I don't think it's organic either.
No. I think I remember seeing an article, I don't know, it's probably 10 or 15 years ago now, and they were talking about California and vegetable production down in California and organic vegetable production specifically, and they'd taken some samples from an organic farm and they'd taken some samples from a conventional farm, looking at soil and the microbe content of the soil and what was actually in there and the whole health of the soil. And the worst soil that they took samples from was the organic farmed soil. And I guess the conclusion that they drew was that the reason it was so bad was because they were tilling so much, like multiple times a year. Like they'd pull a crop out of the bed, whether it be lettuce or whatever, and then the easiest way to prep the bed for reseeding again was tillage. So they'd whip in there with a tiller, till the bed, sow again. So they could be doing that 3, 4, 5 times a season on a particular bed. Like the soil structure was pretty much non-existent. It was just powder, and the biology in the soil was negligible too. And that kind of opened my eyes, because we'd always kind of been down that route, no synthetics, farming as naturally as we could, albeit not certifying organic. And it certainly opened my eyes to the fact that there might be a better way.
I think sometimes these labels can be problematic as well. I mean, there are conventional farmers practice with good practices, practicing good crop rotation or whatever. And then there's organic farmers that rely very heavily on tillage. So, we can't assume that a label means better. We have to as consumers, look into where our food is coming from, be accountable for that, ask our farmers questions if we have that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, go to the farm, go talk to the farmer.
When we started doing the CSA, we wouldn't sell you a CSA box unless you'd come to a farm and taken a look around and asked us some questions. And actually, while people found that quite annoying at first, it really was beneficial for us in the long run, because then they were able to talk positively, not only about the fact that they were receiving veggies every week, and it was great, but the fact that they could talk about farming practices. And it actually became one of our best promotional tools, is that our own customers would advocate on our own behalf, you know. So it was great to do that and get people involved on that level.
We encourage people to come here too. We have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
Good. And we don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if the farmer doesn't want you on his farm, then maybe you shouldn't be buying produce from the farmer that doesn't want you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, what are you hiding? You know?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I often hear, well, biohazards and safe practices is a restriction for doing that. And it's not really. You can manage that. You can get around those things and have the public come onto your farm safely, for sure. So, yeah, if people are hiding behind closed gates, as it were, then there's probably a reason why.
We're involved with the turkey marketing board, and they're totally the other way around. Absolutely. And we don't agree with that at all. At
Yeah.
all.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think maybe the public, or some of the public, would be horrified if they could see what goes on sometimes behind the closed doors and the sort of stuff that's going on the food. I don't think they realize they don't realize what's going on behind closed doors sometimes.
It speaks to our disconnection with food.
It does. Yeah.
I'm gonna end the conversation with a question from Austin, which I think is a great way to end this event. Do you think that a regenerative farming label would be a good idea? So this is a question for you both.
Well, one exists already. There's at least one farm, and I cannot remember the name of it, but I can get back to you on that, Joe, that has a regenerative farming label, but they have to be certified organic to be able to apply for that label, which feels like a contradiction to me, but anyway. So,
And I think that initiative started in the US, right?
yes.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we decided not to certify anything, SPCA or organic or anything at our last farm, and really push that that educational piece, as I say, and that worked better for us, I think, than anybody. And it opened up so much dialogue and discourse about farming practices as well. I don't necessarily think we should be bashing our organic neighbours or, you know, anything like that. We should all just be trying to aspire to do our best, and we do that through conversation, promoting like healthy rhetoric around those issues as well.
I think that certification would be a mistake on regeneration. It is polarized the organic to the chemical farmer, something fierce, and I don't think that would be a smart idea, but we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Cathy and Ian, Glen and Cathy, for joining us today. And to everyone that joined us remotely. I think that has been it's been really fun talking to you both. And thank you so much for all the knowledge that you've offered. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again soon.
We're happy to answer any follow-up questions as well by
Yes.
email, but like it in the next week, because after that we've got no time until November.
I agree. Well, everybody, they're welcome to come and see what we're doing and on the ground. But yeah, for a tour, we'll talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah. And when you get a chance to make your way out to Creston, check out Ian and Cathy's Airbnb. I had the pleasure to stay in the shipping container. That was really fun. And lots of wild turkeys roaming around there. Maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, visit Glen and Cathy as well in Black Creek, I think you would, meeting them in person is just, yeah, it's wonderful. And again, thank you everyone. And I'll say bye now. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see ya.